last but not least, let me speak to Mr. Ebrahim. Welcome, sir. You join us from Oasis Asset Management. So, obviously, your perspective is that of the investor.
Sure.
Are you happy that we're going to draw more investment after this budget?
I think you've got to look at the economy, and what we've done is address poverty and job creation, and we've added additional administrative costs into the system. More fuel levies, which puts pressure on the consumer. So in the one instance, we're addressing job creation, and in the other instance, we're increasing the cost of doing business. So I think that's one issue that one needs to consider. But from an investment point of view, the key issues, rising capital gains tax, rising dividend tax, those are quite important negatives in the short term. However, the savings scheme, the new savings scheme, 30,000 per annum up to a maximum of 500,000, that's a very good positive.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to ask you, this incentive to save more.
Sure.
Do you think we're going to have bigger pension funds now? Do you think we're going to have more people making sure they save for retirement?
This is an alternative to saving for retirement. This is just an additional new product that's tax incentivized, which is common internationally. So typically in South Africa, we've only had tax incentivized retirement fund savings, and we haven't had tax incentivized other savings. So this is the first opportunity to broaden the savings pools outside the tax the retirement fund pool. So that's, I think, a big positive. And as you know, the pension fund reforms kick in 2014 according to the budget. And one must be very careful how that's structured, because are you basically taking out the private sector and replacing that with the public sector? I think importantly we want to broaden the base, but we must also be careful that we're not replacing the public sector, the private sector with the public sector.
How do you think we can balance that?
I think importantly, you know, we've got development needs, and what the great success over the last 15 years has been initially was to broaden the base of taxpayers, simplify the tax codes, increase the efficiency of tax collection. That's worked. However, what has happened over the last couple of years, we're getting greater indirect taxes, and we're getting greater incentives. Now, you're incentivizing people in the one hand to take action, to create jobs and industrial economic zones.
Increasing the cost of that action.
Yes, and so, you know, I think what we need to do is we rather should reduce the tax rates. We should reduce a lot of the tax inefficiencies in the system and create the incentive that way, and let business make the decision rather than try and transform business into making these special things. Very good to create jobs, and that's a big, big effort, because it's jobs, and the focus on poverty alleviation, I think, is the big, big positive with infrastructure. So the infrastructure, I think, in our mining side, we've lost market share in most mining sectors globally over the last 10, 15 years. Maybe this big investment in infrastructure, ports, rail, road, energy, will start redressing, because we can now grow again. And secondly, introducing the private sector in delivering those solutions, I think, is a very big positive.
It's interesting, though, that you had raised the issue of giving with one end and taking away with the other. The action is being made more expensive. Infrastructure, they said specifically they're going to go after the construction sector because they are somewhat undertaxed. Are we missing the balance there?
I'm not sure we are, because if you look at what's happened to the construction sector with the World Cup and the expenditure around the World Cup, there were lots of issues which, most probably with the benefit of hindsight, the construction sector cannot hold their head up very high. And so I think part of this is to address those inefficiencies and ensure that when the next round of expenditure on infrastructure happens, which is starting to happen, the construction sector doesn't lend itself to the abuse that it did around the World Cup, and making sure that the taxes are paid in an efficient and effective way. So I think there are administrative benefits, and I think there are benefits of taking away the inefficiencies of when governments spend, that people don't take super profits out of the equation. And I think in the World Cup, government has learnt a lot from the World Cup spending and the infrastructure around the World Cup. And I think the discussion around construction sector is to ensure that efficiencies improve and that the private sector doesn't take advantage of government sector spending.
Let's talk about the dividend tax. It's quite a steep increase on that. Okay, STC just does fall away, but does it affect people like you who invest on stock markets, etc., and who make a lot of your calculations based on dividends?
Sure. I think the important thing is for pension funds, it's not applicable because they're exempt from the dividend tax. Secondly, so people saving for retirement fund, it doesn't apply to them.
Yeah.
Secondly, with this new 30,000 per annum up to 500,000 tax incentivized scheme, it's not affected by, it's exempt. And then so it really affects the private sector and corporate tax that goes outside those two areas. And I think what it just does is it raises the average tax rate. And it's part of the issue that with administrative prices, you're actually raising the supply side burden.
Yeah.
On the one side, you're improving the supply side this time round with investment in infrastructure and investment in jobs and education. But that takes a long time to come through. A change in tax is immediate.
Yes.
And it raises your weighted cost of capital. And at the time when countries are actually starting to arbitrage the tax situation, we may lose jobs in a situation where we want to create jobs in the private sector that, is cost-effective jobs, high-quality jobs. We may find that those jobs are replaced and taken to other countries.
So it might be an unintended consequence that it's moving backwards.
Yes, I think it's great that we're addressing the social poverty, and the social grants, and that's all great. But the real issue is we need to make government more efficient. We need to make ESCOM more efficient. We need to make Transnet more efficient, and ensure that this electricity price increases that we've had for the last couple of years has done a lot of damage, more damage than what we think, to the employment situation. So I'm sure if you had inflation plus 3% on electricity prices, or 5% since 2000, rather than this 25 to 27% increase over the last 3-4 years, you most probably would have saved a couple of 100,000 jobs.
What about foreign investors? Do you think they'll react positively or negatively to this budget?
With foreign investors, with dividend tax, with withholding, with double tax treaties, etc. So foreign investors effectively, to a great extent, will benefit. They'll get a refund.
Yeah.
So net, I think they'll look positively, because one of the issues is about the social equality and the Gini coefficient.
Yes.
That South Africa is very high. So that side, I think, is very positive, and the investment in infrastructure. I was in London last week attending a couple of company results.
Yes.
And the real issue that people spoke about, the mining companies amongst other, the lack of infrastructure. Now we're addressing that. And the high cost of electricity, which we're not addressing. Mm-hmm. And thirdly, the lack of a broader skilled base.
And of course, that's a long-term solution.
Yes.
And there's one in place, yes. The question of junior miners. There's a lot of incentive provided for them. Obviously, the mining industry is majorly important for us. Junior miners is a speculative game. On the one hand, we're trying to discourage speculation with licensing regulations, etc. On the other hand, we're giving people tax incentives to do so.
I think junior miners globally play an important role because they're the people that prepare to go to pits on the Einde. Where nobody else is supposed to go in their caravans, and they prepare to do prospecting, and they prepare to rough it up. So I think they're an important element of the mining game, like small business is everywhere else. So I think that's a good, but we mustn't be incentivizing junior miners and creating barriers for the majors. And so what we need is, it's great that we are encouraging junior miners, but we also need to encourage existing players and create an environment for existing players to grow and prosper, because importantly, they have the people in place, they have the infrastructure in place, they have the capital base in place, and they have the capital in place, the funding. And so from an efficiency point of view, the majors and the large companies play an important role in getting efficient product out of the system. Junior miners are efficient in exploring and getting new opportunities. So if you get a model that works well, they actually work fantastically in tandem. So it's a great initiative.
Lastly, please just summarize your emotions around this budget for me, please.
I think it's generally, you know, poverty. It's great to address poverty. It's great to address jobs. And so that addresses a big part of the population. The thing about creating all the social welfare, and the problem that we experience in Europe today is a social welfare state that is out of control.
Yeah.
And there isn't enough private sector and economic activity to fund that social welfare state.
Yes.
And where we actually have to be careful, while it's very important to create that underpin, which is really supporting our economy. Those people are buying South African goods and services, food and clothing. It's mainly South African, so it's fantastic underpin.
Yeah.
But what we need to do is to provide the education and the jobs to get them from taking social grants to working, to becoming economically active, growing the economic pie, growing the tax base, so that we can actually get a society where we have greater wealth creation, greater employment, greater sustainability with the social net under there, but fewer and fewer people dependent on the social net. And I just heard what 58% of the budget is on social spending. 1/3 of the population on social grants. Now, if we're going to keep that growing at 2-3% above inflation, and those things don't come down, we could hit to a European situation.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks a lot.